Where do we stand today as far as Chopin's music is concerned?
I think we left off at the Gran Krakowiak for piano and orchestra, and today is the Opus 2, and there are a set of variations on Mozart's well-known aria from Don Giovanni, Darem la mano. When this set was composed, Chopin was all of 18, and it was printed in 1830, and it got to Schumann's hands, Schumann being Chopin's first champion in Germany. He did not at that moment know any other Chopin music, and he had not met Chopin, and he went into ecstasies, and he wrote an article saying, "Gentlemen, hats off, a genius," and then proceeded to go through the set of variations in Schumann's characteristic descriptive manner, and this immediately brought attention to Chopin in Germany.
Was Chopin an admirer of opera? Was that?
Yes, oh yes.
But he didn't write in that form.
No, he did not write any opera, although, as I think we have said before, he was constantly being encouraged, sometimes even manipulated into writing a Polish national opera. But he said, no, that's not for me. However, through his whole life he adored the human voice, always was seen at the opera, and grew up with it. For in Warsaw, one of the highest forms of entertainment was the imported Italian opera. Rossini, Bellini, and other composers of the period were constantly being heard there in some very fine performances also.
Someone once said that Mozart's music was written with a sort of spacing for breathing. In other words, even orchestral pieces or instrumental pieces seem to allow for the breathing of humans, and
Mozart is always thinking, if it's a piano sonata or a symphony, it's an opera. It's the human voice in scenes, and of course it's no mistake that Mozart is the greatest opera composer of the 18th century.
Yet Chopin didn't pick up on any of that. I hate to call it a stylistic thing, because it's not exactly stylistic, it's an approach. He didn't approach composition as if it were a human thing. He really composed for the piano instead, didn't he?
Oh no, all of his melodies are idealized vocal works.
You think they are?
Certainly, the Nocturnes, and how many people have tried to sing Nocturnes and Mazurkas and other of his works? Chopin is always thinking of the piano as a singing instrument. That's his ideal, and he never deviates from it. From first to last, yes.
Well, I mean, yeah, the piano is a singing instrument, but he doesn't see it as an extension of the voice, really.
Yes, he does.
He does, really?
The piano is not a singing instrument. It's a paradox. It's a percussive instrument, and it was Chopin who took and made the cantabile style into the highest form it had been up to that time. Absolutely, he thought of the human voice at all times.
Do you think that since he's working here with obviously vocal materials, this being an aria from a Mozart opera, that he's really at home in this next work?
It's still an immature work. In its day, it was heralded by Schumann, of course, but it's a very effective piece, but it's not mature Chopin yet. It's seldom played today, and it lives mostly on recording. And we will hear a performance of the Variations Opus 2 on Darem la mano in a performance by the Paris Conservatory Orchestra, conducted by Stanislaw Skrowaczewski, the soloist Alexis Weissenberg. Alexis Weissenberg and Stanislaw Skrowaczewski collaborated in this performance of Chopin's Opus 2.
That was given its premiere in Vienna.
It was played in Vienna, and
it must have been a sensation. I mean, especially
right. And you notice it's a virtuoso work.
Yeah.
It was composed, as all of his works for piano and orchestra basically were, to show him off, and this was actually a repellent aspect to Chopin. This showing off, and actually his last public recital took place in 1836. He was only 26 years old. After that, he played in a semi-private way, usually at a small hall, and they were
invitation only, as it were.
More or less, yes. And it was high society people and friends, and there were flowers on stage, and he had to be very comfortable. But the idea of playing in public was a terrifying thing for him, and in a way he envied his great friend Liszt, who, as he said, well, Liszt plays for thousands. I seldom play for one.
Did he make a lot of money off of his concert performances when he was giving them, or?
No, he didn't. Well, he made a good deal from this annual type recital, but his money came from teaching, and he charged up to 30 francs for the 3/4 of an hour, never an hour, and he lived by the clock. And again, it was high society, princess that, countess so-and-so, baroness whatever, and they came one after another, supposedly all very beautiful, and he made a good living from it, because he had to live.
Time went on, as the publishing revenues increased, let's say, or did that just about correspond to his increased expenses and his lifestyle?
The students always were of prime importance to him in his income, and probably one of the reasons he actually left Paris in 1848 was not so much the revolution as all of his aristocratic students were out of town fleeing. So he went too. However, there was no money coming in, and although as ill as he was, it was near the end already, he made a disastrous trip to England and then Scotland.
And of course he made it back to die in Paris.
Right. So important were his furnishings and things like that, that only a month before he died, he made sure of moving again to a marvelous place at 1 Place Vendôme, then very exclusive, and still is. Chopin the pianist, and we were saying that it was not a big thing for him to play in public. In fact, he was so nervous he would lock himself up 2 weeks before any public performance and not practice his own music by any means, but practice the well-tempered clavier of Bach, which he believed in exclusively. He loved this composer dearly, as well as Mozart, and as we have said in other programs, he wasn't interested in almost anyone else's work, especially of the Romantic era, although he was close friends with all of these people, from Mendelssohn to Berlioz, to Victor Hugo, to Liszt, George Sand. All of their work smacked of sensationalism to him. And this most romantic composer has this classical streak in him, this ability to, no matter how romantic, even sentimental at times his melodies are, they always project a perfect formal balance.
He had a lot of so-called enemies, that is, critics of his and people that with whom he didn't agree. Did he have any really lifelong enemies, people who he despised and couldn't stand at all? Apparently the few friends that he had turned into enemies at one time or another and then back again, from what I gather from what you've said.
Well, he seemed to have very few problems, actually, with people. They almost invariably considered him, right in his lifetime, an immortal. Mendelssohn, very prudish and raised in the classical school, at first could not understand his music until he heard Chopin himself play it.
Oh yes, going back to the idea of Chopin playing, even in Vienna when he did these variations we just heard, the newspapers said, well, Chopin plays so soft. He was intimidated by a large room or auditorium, and of course he had strength in those days. However, it was his style, this intimate style, which almost everyone who heard him never forgot. We're going to hear another work, this time for two pianos. It's also an early work, but it's published as Opus 73, and it's the Rondo in C for two pianos. C major Rondo for two pianos by Chopin.
Quite an interesting piece. I'm sorry that he never. You said that he never played that in performance.
No, he played it in Warsaw after he composed it and then lost interest in it. Although it's a bubbling, sparkling work
That it is.
in addition to the two-piano repertoire. However, it is one of the miscellaneous pieces that have very little interest for Chopin players or listeners. However, we are hearing everything, and that's what we're going to do. Now, for a very interesting work, musically, it's a collaboration. And again, it's with cello. Chopin loved the cello, and he had a fine friend who was a good cellist, August Franchomme, who collaborated with Chopin on this work, and it's something I have never heard. So we're going to hear it now, and it's on themes from Robert the Devil, an opera of great fashion at that time by Meyerbeer.
rather simple piece. I mean, as far as the piano playing, or the piano part, certainly interesting, but the cello part seemed to be very simply written, almost as if it were written for one of his students.
Well,
Was it?
these are operatic tunes that he was making the potpourri on. Grand Duo Concertant in E major we have heard from, based on Meyerbeer's opera Robert le Diable. And it was a collaborative work with his friend Auguste Franchomme, who was a cellist in Paris. But Schumann, as usual, loved it, and I find that he writes, "It seems to me that Chopin must have sketched it throughout, while Franchomme said a gentle yes to everything, for whatever Chopin touches takes his form and spirit." So that was that work, and it's certainly nice. Well, as long as we are going to hear cello music, let's hear a transcription of the posthumous C-sharp minor Nocturne of Chopin in an arrangement by Piatigorsky.